software, which they openly admit right here. They've done climate simulations up to the year 2095, but it's actually the year 2100 on this FTP CERC folder, and here's one of the images. And following some of the other images that you could find where the land masses are transparent, and they use all this simulation software to come up with the weather over the oceans. You know, since our weather data comes from our ground-based Doppler radar, and it's impossible to use ground-based systems to cover the entire vast oceans. So that's where the weather over the oceans comes from, their software simulations. Number two, now for the weather over the land, the NOAA has supercomputers that take data coming in from all over the world, Doppler radar feeds, and crunch it all together, and combine it with the weather simulation data over the oceans, so they come up with a complete composite weather quote-unquote map, which is then wrapped around a ball in their 3D modeling software programs, just like we've shown countless times in our previous episodes with the Earth and the planets, etc. So, then what we get are composite images like this that are created in the 3D modeling software. The current Doppler weather data over land and the simulated weather over the oceans, and it looks like this. So this particular image is on the FTP server. It is date and time stamped with October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. I just chose one randomly. Notice the image shows you the weather for the whole ball and not just part of the ball that is lit by the sun at this particular time. No terminator line or anything like that, right? Okay, now here's the kicker. Go to the other file folder, which is the images that we get to see and are told are real pictures from space. But what they've simply done is taken the weather map picture of the whole ball they created and they superimpose it over the blue marble data set, just like they said they did. So what you can see here is the final version of what we're spoon-fed and told is a picture taken by the Himawari from space, like 10 minutes ago. This is the image from the same date and time, October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. And you can see that the weather is exactly the same. Watch it closely. There's your weather map comprised of simulated and Doppler radar being used to complete a composite image. They do this with the Discover satellite too, the Epic camera from 1,000,000 miles away, they tell us. Ridiculous. Okay. Now, also notice the final image has a Terminator line added in to try to make it look like a real picture from space, which drives a nail in the coffin of Himawari because the weather data shows it over the whole ball completely. But they have to add a Terminator line to show the Earth only partially lit by the sun based on the time of day that the photo is allegedly taken. So if this is a real picture, how did they know where to put the clouds and weather on the part of the globe with no sunlight? It's completely dark there. It's all right here, guys. They are faking space. Hey, we all fell for it for a long time with their Doppler radar and weather simulation software, building a current weather picture and wrapping it around the ball in 3D software, pasting it onto a black background like they do with all the others, adding a Terminator line and calling it a real picture from space.
And then the final kicker, I guess, on the Himawari was taking any of the images that we get every 10 or 15 minutes and dropping them into the forensic software to see how they react, see if they react like a real photograph or something that I had taken with my own camera. And there is the noise, and if we could turn up the brightness on the screen, if we could, what you'll see around these, looks a lot better from the ambient light, you have these jagged edges all the way around. So these things are obviously CGI, computer graphic images that have been pasted onto a black background. And again, what's the scientific value of these images if we find all of this manipulation? That's the question that kind of keeps coming up in my mind. Now we're going to move on to something a lot more recent. The Indian space program, just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, attempted to land on the moon. And they sent us some images of the Earth from space. This is from their website. You can see that there were 5 images there of the Earth. So we went in and downloaded those and checked the noise profile. And looked for ambient light. Paste it onto a black background. I thought it's also interesting when you look at a lot of these and you try to look at the metadata. So if you take your picture with your camera and you drop it into the software and you look at metadata, it'll tell you the time, date stamp, the camera that was used, the settings, and things like that. When you go and look at these images from all these space agencies and you look for the metadata, it's all been removed. So there's no evidence, there's no validation, there's nothing, you can't tell what time it was taken, and that sort of thing. And the same thing with the Indian Space Agency here. They removed all of the metadata so that you could perhaps even look at what time and date, when it was taken and what kind of camera it took, or what kind of camera signature, and things like that. Now, what about the other planets in our solar system? Okay, I kind of had to go there, looking into NASA and that sort of thing, but I get that a lot. Maybe those images are real. You recognize that planet? Anyone? Mars, exactly. What about those two? Yep, Neptune and Mercury. That's Venus. And Pluto. Yep. Those look pretty cool, huh? I made those. And the reason I was able to make those is because you go, again, on the NASA FTP server, they have a folder for every one of the planets. And when I started digging in there, I found flat maps of all planets. So all you got to do is take, what's this? This is Mercury. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune and Uranus, and Pluto. Pluto, what a hack job this thing was. Like they got halfway done again. Same guy that was probably trying to remove the box around the Earth. It kind of gets half done or whatever. And it's like, I'm going to head to lunch, and then doesn't come back. That's the flat map of Pluto. You just simply can take it into Photoshop and wrap it around a sphere and a Terminator line. That's all I had to do to basically make another planet, just like we're shown. Those are the same. You do a search for Mars or whatever, you're going to find those maps, and they're going to be on mainstream media websites. And here's a picture of Mars from NASA. Okay. Speaking of Pluto, this was a fun one. Some people haven't seen this. Pluto was discovered, we're told, February 18th, 1930. 1930 is also the year that Pluto, the dog, made its first appearance with Disney. Many people have seen this, but in case you haven't, what are the chances that Pluto was on Pluto? In fact, the more I dug into Pluto, and looking at some of the images that we were getting from NASA, it kind of has an inferiority or a complex, it's a planet, it's not a planet, it kind of goes back and forth or whatever. There was big news released from NASA July 17, 2015. NASA's New Horizons spacecraft discovered frozen plains in the heart of Pluto's heart. And if you read the article, again, July 17, 2015 is when it was released. And it says that the image was taken July 14th, so 3 days later, they get the picture, they write up the story, the latest data from the New Horizons spacecraft. Well, if you take the image there that they gave you and put it into photo forensics, the photo was created originally in 2012. I think they're just making it up as they go. This image was created in 2012, but it was the latest data that we had from the New Horizons spacecraft in 2015. Stuff like that. Stuff just doesn't add up. So, my timing is off here. Sorry. The Earth from space. What do you guys think? Do we have real photographs? I would submit that it's computer graphics. And this was really personal for me because of the simple fact that it was the stumbling block that I had to overcome when it comes to this subject. And this is where I spent my time, analyzing these images. I had help along the way. I want to give credit to a gentleman by the name of Archer Sage, who did a lot of this research. We spent a lot of time on the phone going through folder after folder and analyzing images and starting to find these anomalies. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit to the second section of my video series. Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to play a quick clip here to kind of get you in the mood for this next subject. Who remembers that day? Anybody here? Was it a big deal? It was huge. I mean, all the headlines, right? The celebrations. I unfortunately don't remember because I wasn't alive yet, but this was a big deal. But these guys didn't get the memo. And I think and I'm sure most of you have watched the press conference by now, that press conference. If that doesn't just strike you as odd, their behavior, I don't know what will. Okay? Well, let's get into the moon research, the image analysis, and things like that another friend of mine, Scott Henderson, and I have been putting together over the last year. These are some of the highlights. For somebody that maybe is still thinking the moon landings were legit, I think there's some really damaging evidence here that can be shared with them to kind of show that it's unlikely that the images that we got were really shot on the moon. The first thing I want to go over, though, is I want to slap the hands of many people in the community that are propagating some fake news. Okay? Have you guys seen this image and trying to say, hey, look, the boots don't even match up, right? This is Neil Armstrong's complete kit, they say. This is everything that he was wearing when he stepped foot on the moon. And they're saying, look at the footprint and look at the boots, what he was wearing. That doesn't match up. Has anybody seen this? Okay? Well, it's fake news. And I hope people stop spreading this because they told us that they wore these boots that went over those boots that we were shown. They're right there in the picture, and that's where the footprint comes from. Okay, so when I see this thing being spread online, I try and chime in and say, stop spreading that because that's not a good piece of evidence. Okay, so I'm starting to put that on my presentations to try and get the word out. When I start seeing that public service announcement. This thing really kicked into high gear when the Project Apollo archive was put on the photo sharing site called Flickr. For the first time, we had thousands of high-res images from the Apollo program that the astronauts took themselves. Now, before they were, very low quality, very grainy, things like that. But in 2015, NASA put all of these images on Flickr, and you can also find them on the Apollo Journal sites. So this was a kid in a candy store, really getting to look at some of these images because now we had some real high quality, high resolution, and we could magnify things and really study some of the detail. And that's revealed some very, very interesting things. The first thing, though, before we get into the actual images, is doing a little bit of date reconciliation. And I think this is pretty damaging evidence. At the beginning of every one of the video sequences that we got from the missions themselves, okay, these are cameras that were put on the lunar lander themselves and the rover, and they were taking video taking images. At the beginning, and you can find all these on YouTube, and you can find them all on the NASA website, the Apollo Journal site. At the beginning of every mission, they have a color plate. The color plate is used to obviously adjust the colors on your monitor, whatever you're using, to make sure that you have them dialed in correctly. At the beginning of every one of these video series from each of the missions, they have the color plate and they put a date on it. This is from Apollo 11, and the date is July 11, 1969. Does that cause any problems for anybody? The date. Apollo 11 wasn't launched until the 16th of July. They didn't walk on the moon until the 20th of July. But the videos and the pictures that we got from the astronauts themselves were from the 11th of July. You go check out the training calendar for the Apollo astronauts from the NASA press kits that were given months in advance. This is what their astronauts are going to be doing every day leading up to the launch. I was curious, what were they doing on the 11th of July when all these videos and pictures supposedly were captured? They were doing a translunar injection simulation. Okay, let's go to Apollo 12. I want to call out here, first of all, H. Jones is the inspector, okay? Remember that name, it's going to come up a little bit later. This is very interesting. Apollo 12, November 11th, 1969, are the videos and pictures. What was the launch date? 14th of November. When did they walk on the moon? The 19th. They weren't even on the moon until 8 days after these. And these are sitting here on YouTube. These are on the Apollo Journal site. You click play. You see the color plate. It kind of then fizzles out, and they start playing all the video. So what were the astronauts doing on the 11th of November? Lunar module simulation and command module simulation. And H. Jones. This guy's going to get around. Apollo 14, January 25th, 1971 was when the video and the pictures. They launched on the 31st of January and didn't walk on the moon until the 5th of February. Same problems. What were they doing on the 25th of January? According to the training calendar, months in advance. I'm not sure what all those acronyms mean, but again, I do know that CMS and LMS are the command module in the lunar module simulations. There's kind of a pattern that's going on here, right? And here's what I think is going on is that before you go on stage, you do a dress rehearsal, right? Before these guys were going to be launching, they went through all the motions. They climbed in and out of the lunar module, they climbed in, they did everything that they were going to plan to be doing on the moon, and they took the pictures and they did everything as they were supposed to. And then they launched, and then what NASA gave us was all the simulation pictures and video. Apollo 15, July 17th. They didn't launch until the 26th of July, and they weren't on the moon, allegedly, until the 30th of July. What were they doing on the 17th? Again, simulations. The launch date is, it's over a week later when they were going to launch. Apollo 16 is a little tough to read, the date. But if you look at when they launched and when they landed on the moon, I don't think it's the 20th of April. Looks like the 7th of April or something like that to me. What were they doing on the 7th of April? Again, some more simulations. They launched, again, a little more than a week later. And then Apollo 17, November 28th, 1972. They didn't walk on the moon until the 11th of December. What were they doing on the 28th? EVA, final equipment, orbital geology, lunar module, the command module, transfer. They didn't launch until, again, the 7th of December. And there's Mr. Jones, or Miss Jones. You guys recognize these images. These are called cuff checklists. So the astronauts wore little flip books on their cuffs for the missions. And they would flip through, telling them what they were supposed to do. Make sure they hit all the bullet points. This is a scientific mission, we gotta do all these things. These things are prepared, months in advance as they're planning out the mission. What's Jones doing on the moon? Why does he need to be in the cuff checklist? I think it's so they didn't accidentally get him on film or take a picture of him. That's where he's going to be standing. I just thought it was interesting that in the cuff checklist that they were using on the moon, it was the same name as the person in the videos, the inspector for the videos in the images. You dive into some of these cuff checklists and they're quite amusing. How is NASA going to know in advance that here's the disturbed area, so make sure to avoid it? We're going to break open a rock, and here is what is going to be the mineral components of that rock. Pretty good. Make sure that you have the right settings, and here's the settings for the camera. Here's where the sun's going to be when you do this. Pretty precise. And then always, this goes without saying, Neil, Buzz, and all the other astronauts, make sure that when you are making or following this checklist, that you are having enthusiastic observations. These guys are on stage. These guys got to be following the script as they shoot this thing. And they launch and land on the moon, and we get to see all the pictures and video. Isn't that convenient? We can really kind of break these down and get into some of the specifics, and I'll show you just some highlights. There appears to be an accident happened with Apollo 15. If you look closely, you can see the damage here from the exhaust bell housing. It's crushed. And the rover broke off from its mounts. 15, 16, and 17 were the missions with the rover. Okay, and there's pieces of the lunar lander that are all around. Now this is the only mission, 15 is the only mission where we did not get to see the flag salute. I mean, the first thing that all the other missions did, the astronauts would climb out of the spacecraft, plant the flag, salute it, it's a very patriotic moment, and that sort of thing. But 15, they didn't do that. They went on 2 PPAs, we're told, and then they came back and did the flag. I think they had to clean up the mess. A what? Yeah. Where did we put that thing? You can see some of the pieces here. And if you really examine these photos that we were given, you can see that the damage from the struts, from the landing struts. And it looks like some pieces had to be replaced. Personal life support systems, PLSSs. We're told that each astronaut only had one. Okay, there was no redundancy. If you damaged your pack, you were going to be in big trouble. This is what they wore on their back. Their life support system in their suit. This cooled them, this kept them warm, and obviously provided oxygen for them. Well, when we examined these pictures, we found that there were 2 additional ones sitting here. This is from the accident. You see these 2 additional personal life support systems. Well, that guy's got to be wearing one, and the person taking the picture's got to be taking one. So there's all this extra equipment lying around, and we're told that they each only had one. These are the different rovers from each of the missions. This is 15, 16, and 17. And as you really dive in here and you start looking at these images, you'll see that the rover from each of those missions had an oil leak on the rear left tire. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. What the conclusion that we're coming to as we examine these things is that the same equipment was used mission after mission. Okay? Now we're told that they didn't bring the rover back, they left it up there. Each mission they brought a new one along. But it appears 15, which is the first one, that it was damaged when maybe it was simulated and it was dropped, because we see the damage to the, first of all, you go back to the transcripts and you look, there was no, the astronauts, everything they said, everything that that Mission Control said was written out. We had transcripts of everything. There's no mention of any damage. You know, I mean, if they had landed roughly and the rover had broken off, they probably would have talked about it, okay? If they had all these problems that were going on, there was no mention of any of this stuff. We're finding that it looks like that the rover was damaged when it broke off of its mounts during the simulated landing. And it never was the same. It never worked as it was designed. It had a lot of problems. It kept breaking down. All from the same mission, there's basically 3 different fenders. Okay? There's, again, no mention of any changing of equipment. You know, these guys didn't bring extra fenders along. Okay? This is all from the same mission. We have 3 different tire tracks from the same mission. They changing tires? Okay, let's say they did. Why didn't they talk about it? Hey, Houston, we're going to have to change a tire here. We blew it out. Of course, these things weren't full of air anyway. But the point is, why is there 3 different tire tracks in the same? They kept having problems with these things. This is from Apollo 17, I believe. It's the jump salute. The astronaut is actually off the ground here. He jumped up with a picture. You zoom in on the rover in the background here. This fender is double ribbed. From all 3 missions, that's the only picture of the rover with the double ribbed fender. All the other pictures of the rover from that same mission have a single rib. Inconsistencies, lack of reconciliation. There's this video here from Apollo 16. So I think the one Rob you played was up from Apollo 11.
Oh, look. It never gets
Okay.
old.
16.
Never gets old, does it?
No.
Thunderbirds.
This is from 16.
Go!
Did you notice anything going on here? This one really got me want to look deeper into this. Watch it in slow motion, what happens to the side of the spacecraft here. It blew a side out when it took off.
Mm.
Look at these things just kind of flapping in the wind. You see the wire, the reflection off some sort of wire back there too? Thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
There was some damage that was done here. There's no mention in the transcripts of an explosion or anything like that. Something like that potentially would be devastating to the mission. Here it is, slow motion and close up.
You can't help but laugh at it. You just can't help it.
So it's space worthy to you?
Look at that. What? Come on.
Pizza.
Not even as good as.
These guys aren't talking about
Here's one we
damage
made earlier.
to the spacecraft.
There you go, lovely.
So this was an image that we got from before the mission. This is what it looks like in the clean room. These are, everything is put together in a clean room, so there's no contamination, bacteria, whatever. This is what was behind those panels. Does that look like anything important? Electrical components and things like that, right? That side of the spacecraft blew out. Now, for evidence that they're just recycling this equipment for each of the simulations, for each of the missions, this is Apollo 16 this is on the moon before the liftoff and before the explosion. And if you find an image in Apollo 17, approximately the same angle, this is what you find. It looks like they just replaced those 4. They're a little bit of a different color. They just repaired those 4 panels and they shot 17. I don't think they had to make a new lunar lander for each mission. I just think they used the same one. But we're told it was left on the moon, at least part of it. And then some of the other highlights would be evidence of moisture on the moon. Okay? We're told that the surface of the moon is 10 times 11 to the negative 4. Okay? Moisture cannot exist. What happens even at 60 miles? Okay? You get the pressure so low the water boils. Okay? Moisture cannot exist at that low of an air pressure. But we see mold and mildew growing on things. Okay? Here's evidence of water. standing water. And you can see here this piece of scientific equipment. Looks like they ripped off the top of a school desk. You can see where the glue is. This is like a hastily made prop, is what it seems like to me. This looks like water to me. Look how reflective that surface is compared to the others. And look at how this is peeling up from the sides. I think this is the same equipment used over and over and over. And we talk about that this was, we like to speculate that the moon landings were shot on a stage, or in a studio. I think this stuff was shot outside. I think we see evidence of aging and moisture and damage outside of the equipment, mission after mission after mission. The stuff is, each mission gets a little bit worse for wear. There's moisture here. Looks like the panel is drying. This was an image that we were given. This was somewhere like halfway between the Earth and Moon. It's like why would they have something like a rain guard for the outside of the spacecraft that's been damaged and looks like repaired with some tape? This was taken halfway to the Moon. Look at the moisture between the two panes of glass. The seal broke. We're speculating that during a pressure test, they blew a seal and moisture has got between the two panes. It's supposed to be negative 250 degrees outside. How is the moisture, how does that happen? And then there's the famous Apollo 17 image of the astronaut, the flag, and the Earth in the background. And I think this one has been staring us in the face for a very, very, very long time. Because if you zoom in on the flag, I think it's wet and been drying from the edges in. Now, you might come to a different conclusion. That flag looks wet to me. And as it's dry, I think it's left outside, and I think moisture, whether it's rain or dew or whatever, the mist of the morning, and as throughout the day, you can see it's been drying. And there's a really close-up image of it. You can see it in the red areas too, with high resolution.
First, many have doubted for 50 years now how those...
Let me set this up first real quick. I think this is the last clip. Mark Sargent's going to get a kick out of this one. It's all about the spacesuit. Okay? I think this is really the key. Okay? This is from a recent video that I did about 3 or 4 months ago, and it really analyzes the astronaut spacesuit. I think it's only about 5 minutes.
First, many have doubted for 50 years now how those white, fluffy, but bulky-looking spacesuits we are also familiar with could withstand such a low-pressure environment and not become immediately rigid and render the astronauts completely immobile. But we must be careful when touting that whole idea as proof that the spacesuits wouldn't work, as advertised, because NASA claims to have figured that out long before astronauts allegedly stepped foot on the moon. You see, according to NASA, the astronauts actually donned 2 spacesuits, a pressurized inner suit, as seen here, which was beneath the unpressurized outer white one. So don't be quick to claim the outer white suit would balloon up as the air pressure was reduced, because, as the story goes, that part of the spacesuit wasn't even pressurized. We are told this inner pressurized spacesuit, which would still, even to this day, have to be considered a modern marvel of technology, was airtight, mostly made of neoprene, and was contained within a layer of embedded mesh-like material to keep it from expanding. Kind of like a balloon inside a bag of netting, only allowing the balloon to expand so far. Further, we're told the fingers, shoulders, knees, and elbows of this inner pressurized suit had accordion-like joints that allowed flexing without ballooning. Truly, a technological masterpiece. The outer layer, the white, unpressurized suit, was made of fireproof, abrasion-resistant material, we're told, which was designed to provide thermal insulation and protection against micrometers, but only works in a vacuum. So, case closed, right? Not so fast. When you start to closely examine the photographs and employ some basic common sense, as usual, NASA's story just doesn't add up. And here's why.
If the white outer suit wasn't pressurized and was designed only to serve as a thermal outer layer, then why do the gloves and helmet attach directly to this unpressurized suit? This is Neil Armstrong's suit as displayed by NASA as his complete kit. The suit, flown in Apollo 11 for the claimed moon landings. It has been on display for many years and has been restored and cleaned in an attempt to keep it from decay and as a permanent record of the claimed event. The International Latex Corporation was contracted to make the suits. NASA's updated files claim that it has 21 layers of protection. Interesting that none are listed as a protection against radiation, however, but I digress. Here's another attempt to show the updated movements of the astronauts in their suits. The image on the left is from the Apollo 11 press kit. On the right is an image of the alleged pressurized suit. However, it's not pressurized in this photo, and is certainly not in a vacuum chamber. It's clear to see that the suit in the previous frame is not incorporated into this suit. This is a costume for simulation only and does not have the seals required to pressurize. On the top left, the ring is not sealed to the suit and the zipper does not go all the way up. And the zipper would not seal and hold any air pressure. The seals and connections of the helmet and gloves do not compress and have a door latch tongue design for a quick attachment. The suit is done up using zippers, poppers or snaps, and Velcro. This would not seal. The zipper does not go all the way up, would not even hold a small amount of pressure. Again, these suits were designed to put on and off easily for simulation purposes and media events only. There is not a pressure suit inside. Even if the inner pressurized suit NASA claims the astronauts wore under the outer unpressurized suits, even if it was incorporated into or between the white abrasion layers, it still wouldn't seal because of the snaps and zipper connections. The connection rings on the glove and the suit are clearly not connected. The band on the suit is visible and the ring is just below it. The gap between the rings are about 3 inches apart. The ring in the glove is behind the watch. And the rings themselves are a quick connect and cannot seal in the vacuum of space or even underwater. The suit is a stage costume used for practice and simulations. The images here are from Buzz descending the ladder from the Apollo simulation photos numbered here. It is very clear the gloves are not attached and of course cannot be in a vacuum. It is clear to see here that the connections are attached to this garment and not to the claimed pressurized suit, as there isn't one underneath or incorporated in. The connections shown here are not sealed properly to withstand the vacuum of space. On the left is a food port attached to the bubble helmet, but as you can see, the seal cannot be compressed as what would be required, and the inside air pressure would push the cover out and away from the seal. It cannot be used in a vacuum, so the only reason it must be there is to give the astronauts a drink using a straw during practice or simulations. On the above left are 4 photos of high vacuum seals, metal, and one-time use materials. These are needed to seal in a high and ultra-high vacuum areas, of which the moon, we are told, was a ultra-high vacuum area at 1 × 10⁻11 torr. On the right are the helmet seals of the Apollo missions. The latch fits in the groove for easy installation. This connection does not have the capability to compress the seal and would not function even in a low vacuum. The gloves have a similar type for an easy connection. The surfaces must be clean and free of foreign materials for the seal to be effective. The Apollo astronauts using the same suits covered in dirt for 3 EVAs, it would be impossible for the suits to work and reseal each time. The same is true for the hatch for the LEM, as they had to crawl through, dragging dust and dirt with them. The door seals would not function. The LEM could not be repressurized after re-entry. And the fact remains. The helmet and gloves clearly were attached to the outer white, non-pressurized suit. Even if the connections to the helmet and gloves were able to withstand an ultra-high vacuum environment, the outer white suit would have to be pressurized, which is in direct conflict with NASA's claims. Someone is lying.
two suits. So we need to stop claiming that the white outer layer would become rigid immediately in the vacuum of space. There was supposed to be a layer underneath that was pressurized, except all the connections are only on the unpressurized part. I think that's a real continuity error when it comes to the spacesuit. I'll go through the rest of these slides quickly because I'm almost out of time. Image on the left looks like a rock in the background. You zoom in. I think that's a beer can. It's definitely not a rock. I'm not sure what it is. It looks a lot like the can there, but it looks metallic. It looks like it's got some color and it looks shiny. I don't think that's a naturally occurring object on the moon. I just thought this was interesting. New York Times, December 30th, 1969. Neil Armstrong predicts that we will be on Mars by 1983. I'm going to skip over that. I'll talk about that offline. I don't have time to watch all of this. So with everything you've seen here, my intent really was to, if there's anybody here that maybe was still trusting NASA at some level, showing that there's a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of doublespeak, talking out of both sides of their mouth. Hopefully some cracks in the foundation of somebody's trust in NASA at least has been, at least you've been given enough evidence here to maybe look into this thing. And that's the whole idea of my series, was just to get people to question whether this stuff that they were giving us is real or not, whether it's images from space, whether it's moon landings, etc. And it's very personal for me because the way I look at it is, in the States, I'm giving my tax dollars every week, every month, every year to this organization. And I think there's zero scientific value that we're getting. And I think they're just faking space. I think they're literally faking space, and they're using my money to lie to my kids and your kids, and lie to my parents and your parents. And I'm sick of it. And that was the motivation for this series. And I hope you start to share some of those feelings as well. So, when it comes to the shape of the Earth, NASA says, don't worry, we checked. Well, we checked you, NASA, and you failed miserably.
Double check.
Real quickly, if you'd like to see the video series, it's free on my website, fakingspace.net, redirects right to my main page, where you can see there's over 30 videos where I dissect this thing at a much greater level. These are just some highlights, little snippets to whet your appetite. Hopefully on your seat you saw a card there, so you're reminded of what that website is. Please check it out. If you have time, please feel free to share it. Again, it's free. Dome Life with Paul and Mitch is my podcast, released every week. Not this month, I'm traveling a lot. DomeLifePodcast.com, also available on most major platforms. And then, don't forget to miss Paul and McLean Live with me and the lovely, talented, and warrior for truth, my co-host, Roxanne the Globalist Denier, every week at truthfrequencyradio.com. And you can also find all of our archives at tfrlive.com/Paul and McLean. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be up here. Thank you again, Robin, for inviting me. I had a lot of fun, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.